The first signs didn't arrive as shouting or slammed doors. They came quietly, hidden in unanswered messages and unfamiliar distance. Shanann Watts felt it before she could explain it. From the outside, her marriage still looked intact, but in her private messages to Chris, something fragile was already breaking. She wrote with warmth, with routine affection, asking about his day, reminding him she loved him. The replies came back shorter than usual. Less emotion. Fewer words. Silence where reassurance used to be. She questioned herself at first. Stress, work, exhaustion, there were always explanations. Shanann reminded Chris of their bond, of the life they built together, of the family they shared. Her words weren't accusatory, they were hopeful, almost pleading for closeness. But hope, when unanswered, begins to ache. Nights passed where she stared at her phone, waiting for replies that felt colder each time they arrived. There was no proof yet. Just a feeling. A heaviness that settled in her chest and refused to leave. Shanann sensed a wall forming, brick by brick, each message confirming what her intuition already knew. She asked gently if something was wrong. She reassured him she was there. She apologized for things she didn't fully understand. Love made her patient, but patience can turn painful when met with indifference. As you listen to these early warning signs unfold, take a moment to reflect, and if stories like this help you recognize hidden truths, quietly like this video so others can find it too. The marriage that once felt secure now felt unfamiliar. Shanann wasn't confronting betrayal yet, she was standing at the edge of it. In her messages, there was still faith, faith that honesty could fix things, that distance could be closed. But beneath every word was a growing certainty she couldn't shake. Something had changed. And deep down, she already knew it wasn't coming back the same. Distance became the loudest thing between them. Shanann's messages grew longer, heavier, filled with questions she tried not to ask directly. She was careful with her words, choosing love over accusation, reassurance over suspicion. She talked about therapy, about communication, about fighting for their marriage instead of letting it quietly disappear. Each message carried the weight of someone trying to save something already slipping through her hands. Chris's responses didn't match her urgency. They were delayed. Detached. Sometimes only a sentence. Sometimes nothing at all. The contrast was painful. Where Shanann poured emotion into every word, Chris offered silence in return. She asked him if he still wanted to be with her, if there was something she had done wrong, if he was just tired or unhappy. His answers avoided the heart of her questions, skirting around the truth without ever addressing it. She blamed herself in those moments. Maybe she talked too much. Maybe she expected too much. Maybe distance had changed them both. Shanann tried to adapt, promising she could be patient, promising she could change if that's what it took. She reminded him of the love they once shared, of memories that weren't supposed to fade so easily. She believed honesty could still bring them back together. If you want to stay connected as this story unfolds, take a quiet moment to subscribe, because what comes next only grows heavier. What Shanann didn't realize was that the emotional withdrawal wasn't temporary. It was intentional. The man she was reaching for was already gone, mentally and emotionally detached from the life they built. Her messages kept searching for clarity, but clarity never came. Each unanswered question tightened the knot in her chest. By the end of those exchanges, hope hadn't vanished, but it had changed. It was no longer bright or confident. It was fragile, trembling beneath the fear she was trying not to name. And somewhere beneath all the reassurance she typed out, Shanann began to sense a truth she wasn't ready to face: love alone wouldn't be enough this time. By then, the silence had patterns. Shanann noticed them the way you notice a ticking clock in a quiet room, impossible to ignore once you're aware of it. Chris was suddenly busy at unfamiliar hours. His availability shifted without explanation. The warmth in his messages didn't just fade, it vanished. And in that absence, Shanann's instincts grew louder. She didn't accuse him outright. Not yet. Instead, she asked questions that circled the truth. Who were you with? Why don't you call anymore? Did I do something to push you away? The replies came carefully neutral, stripped of affection, as if emotion itself had become a liability. Shanann read them again and again, searching between the lines for reassurance and finding none. At night, alone with her thoughts, the idea she feared most began to take shape. There might be someone else. Not a theory, a presence. She felt it in the way he guarded his phone, in the way laughter disappeared from their conversations, in the way he spoke about their future as if it were already past. Her messages grew braver, less cautious. She spoke of honesty. She asked for truth, even if it hurt. There are moments in life when intuition whispers before reality confirms it. If you've ever felt that quiet warning before, pause for a second, and like and share this story so others can recognize it too. Shanann didn't want to be right. She wanted to be wrong more than anything. She reminded Chris of their vows, of the family waiting for him, of the love that still existed on her side. But her words now carried a different tone, steadier, more resolved. She was no longer just trying to fix things. She was preparing herself for the truth. By the end of those conversations, suspicion had hardened into understanding. There was no confession yet, no name spoken, but the reality was undeniable. Shanann knew she wasn't imagining the distance. She wasn't overreacting. By the time Shanann stopped hinting and started confronting the truth, exhaustion had settled into every word she wrote. She no longer danced around the questions. She asked him directly if there was someone else, if he was being honest with her, if their marriage still mattered to him at all. There was no anger in her messages, only pain, controlled and deliberate, as if she knew that raising her voice wouldn't bring him back. Chris's responses stayed measured and distant. He denied without convincing, reassured without warmth. His words felt practiced, empty of emotion, offering just enough to keep the conversation going without revealing anything real. Shanann pressed gently but firmly, explaining how the distance was breaking her, how uncertainty was worse than the truth. She told him she could face anything if he would just be honest. She spoke about the children, about the life they had planned, about the future that still existed if they chose it. Shanann made it clear she was willing to fight, willing to forgive, willing to rebuild from the ground up. What she wasn't willing to do anymore was pretend nothing was wrong. The woman who once blamed herself now stood grounded in what she felt was real. There's a moment in stories like this where everything hangs in the balance. If you're still here, take a second to subscribe, because what follows is where silence becomes irreversible. Chris never fully met her where she stood. The emotional gap remained, wide and unmoving. Shanann sensed it in how he spoke about separation without saying the word, how he avoided discussions about repair, how the idea of working things out seemed to burden him. She wasn't just being shut out, she was being erased. As her return home drew closer, the tension thickened. Shanann felt the weight of knowing without hearing it confirmed. She had done everything she could through words alone. And now, faced with the reality of seeing him again, a quiet unease followed her, a feeling that something was terribly wrong, even if she couldn't yet explain why. Shanann's final messages carried a calm that felt unfamiliar, almost deliberate. The desperation was gone, replaced by a careful choice of words, as if she understood that every sentence mattered now. She told Chris she knew. Not with bitterness, not with rage, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already accepted the truth. The affair no longer lived in suspicion. It existed in the spaces he refused to fill with honesty. She asked him to talk when she got home. Not to argue, not to accuse, but to be truthful, finally. Shanann wrote about forgiveness, about transparency, about rebuilding if he was willing. She made it clear that cheating had hurt her deeply, but secrecy hurt even more. She needed clarity, not distance. Closure, not silence. There was still love in her words. That was the most heartbreaking part. Even knowing she had been betrayed, Shanann held on to the belief that honesty could change the outcome. She told him she deserved the truth. She reminded him of the family waiting for him, of the life they had created, of the consequences of continuing to lie. Her messages weren't weak, they were resolute, grounded in self-respect she had fought to reclaim. As this story reaches its final moments, pause with us, and if stories like this deserve to be remembered, quietly like, subscribe, and share so these voices are never forgotten. Chris's replies remained hollow. No reassurance. No commitment to repair. Just emotional absence dressed as calm. Shanann sensed the finality in that absence, even if she didn't yet grasp the danger behind it. She boarded her flight believing a conversation awaited her, believing truth would finally surface face to face. Those last messages stand as proof. She knew about the cheating, she confronted it, and she still chose love over fear. What she didn't know was that honesty would never come, and that her courage would be met not with truth, but with silence that followed forever.